When Teo reached the 10th floor, a message began to appear informing him that the reward was being calculated. Once the calculations were completed, Teo was informed that the prize would be awarded 24 hours after entering the 11th floor. Spirit noticed the concerned look on his face and asked about it. The spirit acknowledged that getting through the hidden levels was not an easy task, and noted that the rewards were quite good. Teo, feeling heavy, responded by saying that the spirit wouldn't understand since he wasn't human. Teo expressed his thoughts on how unhappy and frustrating the world was, drawing parallels between the boss stages they had just encountered and the realities of their two worlds. For the next moment, Teo and the spirit stood silent. Suddenly, the spirit broke the silence and shouted that he could not participate in such discussions. Instead, he praised Teo for his excellent job of taking down the bosses in his own unique way. He congratulated him and emphasized that it was his own skill and not just luck. As partners, when good things happen, they should be happy. At that moment, fireworks lit up the sky, creating a dazzling spectacle. The cost of the 10th floor was reduced, and an announcement appeared that access to the 11th floor would open in 24 hours. As the sky filled with fireworks, people on every floor of the tower began to question the reason for the spectacle. Discussions about the fireworks and their meaning unfolded in an open forum. One person asked if it was fireworks. This was limited to the first floor, but another person replied that he had witnessed the same spectacle on the 3rd floor. During the discussion, someone brought up the cleaning of the 10th floor, and this sparked speculation as to who might have accomplished such a feat, raising the possibility that the guild was responsible. But another participant reported 2 weeks later that the guild was planning to raid the 10th floor. As Teo and the spirit watched the fireworks, the spirit told him that he had seen this exact scene in his past life, and it was his second observation of such an event. On the other hand, the open forum discussed the identity of the people and groups that cleared the 10th floor, eliminating the top hunters and guilds as candidates because they knew they weren't on the 10th floor. The question on everyone's mind was, who was it? Who had managed to conquer the 10th floor? The spirit commented on Teo's transition from an extra to the main character, asking how he was feeling. Teo replied with a smile, expressing the incredible feeling of having the whole world in their hands. The spirit smirked and acknowledged his accomplishment, noticing that they could only make it through the 10th floor, but they were the closest in their world to the top. Teo recognized this fact and realized that their next goal was to get to the top of the tower. Suddenly, a voice interrupted Teo, and a guard rushed over to him, asking if he was the one who had cleared the 10th floor. Teo asked the guard about the situation. The guard, stammering, explained that he was the only known person who had challenged the 10th floor that day. Chaos was brewing, and the officials were demanding information about what had happened. Teo defiantly responded and asked the guard what to do if he was really the one mopping the floor. The guard was shocked as Teo started to walk away. In desperation, the guard asked him to at least give his nickname, but Teo simply said he didn't have one. The spirit intervened and told Teo that he had made the right decision. It was very important to hide his identity, and he had to let others search for him. Teo realized something and turned to the spirit. With a wicked smile, he showed that he understood why the spirit admired him so much. He recalled the spirit of their previous agreement, in which the spirit promised to treat him as Lord Teo if he took out the boss on 2 tries. Teo smirked as he recounted his exploits and claimed to have gotten to the 10th floor with only 2 coins. Spirit tried to reason with him, emphasizing their partnership and equality. He massaged Teo's shoulders and talked about their journey together. He was the hunter who reached the 99th floor, and Teo was the one who conquered the 100th. The spirit saw them as partners and friends. Ignoring the spirit's words, Teo ordered him to return to the 1st floor. Before leaving, he looked back at the spirit and said that, from now on, the spirit should address him as Lord Teo for the rest of his life. While Teo was sitting in the cafe, the people around him were discussing that someone had actually cleaned the 10th floor. Some speculated that the guild might have done it. Someone had cleaned it, but had deliberately hidden the accomplishments. Teo turned to the spirit, calling him Mr. Sword Spirit, and asked his opinion, noting the sweetness of victory, much like his caramel latte. He then pretended his headphones weren't working and playfully addressed the spirit, using various exaggerated nicknames such as Mr. Psycho. The frustrated spirit finally answered and asked what Teo wanted. Teo smiled and laughed that he finally heard the spirit's voice and jokingly reprimanded him for making his master worry. He suggested they talk casually, because it was strange that Teo had formally addressed the spirit and the spirit called him his teacher. The spirit cried out and expressed his desire to learn new skills and become his old self again. Teo acknowledged that it was a big decision and emphasized that they were life partners and would be together forever. After a while, Teo looked at his watch and realized that an hour and a half had passed. At that moment, he noticed the cat and thought to himself that such an important person had started looking for him. No one knew about the cat yet, so he decided to pretend he didn't know. Teo put the cat on his lap, asked if it was lost, and invited it to play with him. The cat responded with a meow sound. Teo thought about the person inside the cat and noted his incredible acting ability. Suddenly, a group of people approached Teo and asked if he was a hunter. Teo waited for them and commented on how long he thought it had taken to wait for them to arrive, saying that it had been exactly an hour and 30 minutes. Teo showed his hunter card to confirm his identity, and upon confirmation, the group immediately began contacting the boss. The chief among them showed interest in Teo joining their guild. However, Teo interrupted him and emphasized two important points. First, he didn't want to attract much attention to himself, so he asked not to reveal his name to the press. In front of the entrance on the 11th floor, when they asked how long he should withhold his name, he pointed to his watch and told them to wait until they reached 0. The group confirmed the request. Second, he reminded them to pay attention to visitors to public cafes. As a result, the group left the cafe and gathered around his table to continue the discussion. They began offering him various rewards, including money and positions in their guild. Teo noticed that he seemed surprised at the mention of Holy Sword, a high-ranking person who didn't belong to the guild. People were wary of the guild. People had been wary of the guild and their intentions for the sacred sword, and now they were looking for someone who could trump the rumors surrounding it. Teo pointed out that they should not try to recruit him by hiding their true intentions. Suddenly, the cat sitting on Teo's lap spoke up, offering 500,000 gold on behalf of the merchants. The cat then gracefully jumped off his lap and introduced herself as the Countess, the leader of the Rank 3 Alliance Merchant Guild. She sent an invitation to Teo, offered him the position of deputy guild leader, and asked his opinion on the matter. Intrigued by the negotiations, Teo took off his headphones and realized that they were finally starting to resemble real negotiations. During the conversation, the Countess admitted that Teo wasn't surprised by her transformation from cat to human. Teo thanked her, saying that he even had the ability to see ghosts, jokingly pointing out his relaxed nature. He couldn't believe that the Countess was already in her 40s. She was the richest person at the top of the tower. He assumed that she probably consumed some sort of youth potion every day to maintain her appearance. At that moment, the blond man stood up and expressed his concern over the offer of 500,000 gold and Teo's status as a deputy guild master. He questioned Teo's unknown skills despite his impressive feat of passing the 10th floor. The Countess dismissed the man's concerns and told him to bring his boss to continue the conversation. She made it clear that she could not argue with him and would only consider those who could offer more than 500,000 gold pieces. Suddenly, a loud voice was heard from the entrance, cursing the cat. The Countess noticed the door and announced that the people they were waiting for had arrived. Rank 5. Clan, Snake Guild leader entered and cursed the Countess. Clan Rank 4, Cult Investigator followed, admitting his mistake a step late. Clan Rank 8, Deputy Guild leader also arrived and emphasized that the term mistake was inappropriate. Their role is to prevent confusion among the existing hunters. The guild from the second floor, the master of the Black Witches Guild, arrived unnoticed. Teo saw them in shock and realized that all the people of the highest rank had gathered in one place. The Countess recalled the rarity of their meeting and how it was as if it was only yesterday that they had conquered the second floor together. The enraged guild leader disturbed her and threatened to make soup out of her. He continued to shout and questioned her tendency to flaunt her wealth, setting a reward of 500,000 gold pieces. The famous investigator diffused the situation for a moment by offering to order coffee. After ordering drinks, they turned their attention to Teo and asked what he wanted. Sensing their ordeal and the need to keep his composure, Teo pondered whether the guild leader's presence was a coincidence or part of a strategy to suppress him. The spirit calmed Teo down and reminded him that he shouldn't be afraid, but that they were trying to test him and intimidate him. Teo realized this and decided to show relaxation rather than fear. He asked the waiter for a menu and, after looking through it, asked for hot chocolate instead of coffee, explaining that he wasn't in the mood for coffee right now. Teo admits the worst, reflected in his lack of fear of the guild leader. They could have killed him. The cult researcher found the transformation of Teo from a seemingly inexperienced hunter to his current state interesting, noting that he was suddenly a completely different person. The Countess admitted that Teo was not completely inactive, but had luck, courage, and perhaps some skills. She revealed that Teo had recently been chosen to enter a lottery, the winner of his guild. According to the Countess, young men with these qualities would succeed in whatever they did. The leader agreed, stating that someone who passed the 10th floor couldn't be a rookie. He urged the others to stop pretending and just recruit Teo. The Black Witch intervened, suggesting that their reputation shouldn't overshadow the main issue. She then turned her attention to Teo and asked him directly what guild he was planning on joining. She warned him that they would have to discuss how to handle the media if he wasn't going to register with a guild like Holy Sword, and asked him what would happen if, oddly enough, he did plan to join a guild. The Black Witch explained that a tense auction would follow. She said that they had spent too much time on the 9th floor, but clearing the 10th floor provided an opportunity to announce the value of the tower to the outside world. This could not only attract war refugees, but also rekindle a sense of adventure among the hunters living on the first floor. She emphasized the curiosity that arises about the world waiting on the 11th floor and how it will sustain the tower. Teo added that a solution to the food shortage was also possible. The Countess recognized that it was not enough, even though she had left the road open to the outside world. She thought it was time for a new approach. They needed to take the adventurer to the ground beyond the 10th floor to discover something that could only be found there. They also needed an active way to promote the tower to the outside world, a symbol that could herald the beginning of a new era. Realizing the implication, Teo wondered if the Black Witch was suggesting that he was the symbol. Teo pondered the situation, remembering that the Flame Emperor had already tried to kill the icon. He didn't know the reason for it, but he saw an opportunity to turn the enemy of his enemies into his friends. Teo accepted the offer, and the guild that successfully took over became the new symbol of the tower's growth, while the other guilds probably had to act as subordinates. He expressed concern about this result and suggested a different approach. Taking out a deck of cards, Teo surprised them all. He offered to join the guild that won first place in the poker game. He didn't want money or positions. However, if he came out as the winner, he would simultaneously apply to join all of their guilds. In the eyes of the public, he would become a member of the guild, but in reality, they would have to treat him as an equal. The Countess laughed at the boldness of the young man who had just cleared the platform and wanted to be on the same level as them. She accepted the challenge. The cult investigators agreed, provided there were no tricks. The leader suggested refraining from using their skills to avoid an unfair advantage. Those caught using their skills would be disqualified, and the others said that their guild was poor, so betting on Teo would cause a loss and make the offer favorable. Black Witch also agreed to this proposal. Teo turned to the spirit and asked if he liked calling him Teo. The spirit was puzzled by this question, and Teo advised him to call him that for the rest of the game. In return, he asked the spirit to inform him of the cards each player had. The spirit danced excitedly and thanked Teo for his offer. He even promised to find out if anyone was cheating and praised Teo for his generosity. He nodded and announced that it was time for them to start the game. When the poker game began, the spirit stood behind the Countess. As the Countess seemed to straighten up, he advised the player to discard her. Following the spirit under Teo's guidance, he discarded the card. Moving on, the spirit approached the leader and saw his card. Frustrated, he noticed the audacity of the leader bluffing at only one pair. He urged Teo to call and destroy the leader without hesitation. Teo heeded the spirit's advice and rang the bell. Now the spirit climbed under the table and declared that he was aiming for a full house, but he assured Teo that after studying the tables and decks, he would never be able to collect a full house. Inspired by the spirit's words, Teo decided to go all in. There was a brief moment of silence, after which the leader threw his cards on the table in despair. He pointed his finger at Teo and shouted that there was no point. The guild leader said that they had played 30 rounds already and Teo hadn't lost a single round. He thought that it was cheating and that bluffing against Teo had no effect. Calmly, Teo asked the leader if he had any evidence to back up his accusation. He reminded the leader that he could become an accomplished poker player and expressed disappointment if he accused him without evidence. In response, the guild leader said that Teo's gloating gave him away and emphasized that Teo could never become an F-rank player. Surprising the leader, he revealed that he had recently been promoted to rank E, but had not had a chance to report it. Caught off guard, the leader stumbled while Teo playfully thanked him for the compliment. He then asked about the leader's chip count, mocking him and calling him a gatekeeper. The latter, realizing that he was in an awkward position, barely hesitated to answer. When the guild leader stepped aside, the cult researcher greeted him and said that it was time for the clan to be banished in the battle for the heavens, and ordered another espresso for him. But the leader vehemently expressed his indifference to the drink. The tension in the room was evident as only 3 people remained, along with Teo. One of them admitted defeat and expressed confidence with an invulnerable face. He asked if Teo had used his mind-reading skills. Teo playfully responded by stating that he might be using mind-reading or X-ray vision. The leader noticed the sacred knight's resignation and angrily yelled at him, urging him not to give up so easily. He accused Teo of cheating and asked why the knight had dismissed the cheaters. He also claimed that the man had cheated everyone. Knight defended Teo, calling him a new hero, and dismissed the leader's claims, saying that he knew of Teo's skills from the beginning. The leader was stunned by the knight's revelation and wondered how he could have known that. The knight explained that it was strange not to notice Teo's skills. He said that newcomers didn't offer games and didn't bet everything on luck. In fact, Teo challenged them to a game and showed them that he was going to beat them, so they didn't realize his real abilities. The knight also said that there was nothing to lose from the start. Victory would be great, but even in defeat there were advantages. The leader protested, worried about his pride and how the newcomers would be able to rise in their ranks. The knight objected, asking the leader if his pride could put food on the table. The cult investigator intervened, placing a cup of espresso in the leader's mouth. Now only Teo and the Black Witch were left in the game. The Black Witch spoke up to Teo, who softened his opinion by saying that he was glad he was a reasonable man. She talked about her background, or rather, that she had lost her family. Civil war. She lived her life as a foreigner. She said that the girls had nowhere to live, whether it was their current place of residence or the outside world. Teo thought about the Black Witch's words and accepted her point of view. He agreed that the people of the tower, especially the first generation, had their own stories to tell. He admitted that he himself had been an ordinary orphan. The Black Witch considered the tower her homeland, where people's origins didn't matter. She emphasized that in the tower they could understand each other's words, and they were all equal competitors, at least more so than in the outside world, where they were considered disposable. She used the analogy of a blooming rose from a garbage can to explain this even in an unfavorable situation in which greatness might arise. The Black Witch spoke directly to Teo and warned him of the inevitable attention he would receive. As the clock ticked towards 0, he would get it, and his life would be turned upside down. She urged him to choose wisely. Teo responded with confidence, a desire for attention, and praise and inspiration for others. The Black Witch marveled at Teo's sincerity and compared him to a sword saint. Meanwhile, Teo ponders the strong arm of the guild leader and realized that his own arm might not be enough to defeat her, but he decided to show his confidence and go all out. Teo said that clearing the 10th floor wasn't his only accomplishment. He boldly announced his intention to conquer the 20th, 30th, 50th, and finally 100th floors of the tower. He respected the tower and its value to all, but expressed his desire to explore the world beyond. He admitted that he did not know about hunger and poverty in the tower, but encouraged others to use his name to address these issues if they wished. In turn, he really wanted to experience the joy of reaching the top, so he asked for their help in climbing the tower. Black Witch sighed, acknowledged her previous mistakes, and said that Teo did indeed look like a holy sword. Teo asked if that was a compliment, but the Black Witch explained that it was an insult and considered both of them greedy. She revealed her final hands. She had a flush and Teo had a full house. Teo smiled, considering it a compliment and hoping that he would now be treated as an equal. The Black Witch asked if he was responsible, and Teo replied that the responsibility was to climb the tower. Hunter, who assures her that she shouldn't worry. The Black Witch smiled and noted Teo's easygoing nature as a newcomer. The spirit praised Teo happily, saying that if ease was a skill, Teo would have an S rank. He then started calling him a zombie and expressed his joy at how beautiful the word was. Teo was confused by the spirit's enthusiastic remarks and asked if this person was really a sword emperor. As Teo got ready to leave, the Black Witch asked if he had already left. Teo remembered to mention that the 11th floor would be opening soon, and he should be ready to catch up. The Black Witch asked how he could prepare even though he doesn't even know what's in store for him. Teo explained that the topic from the 11th to the 20th floors was role-playing. He got tips on how to get through the 10th floor, but he had no other knowledge. When Teo left, Black Witch expressed her intention to repay her debt to him someday. People were eagerly awaiting the opening of the 11th floor, but excitement was in the air. Only 11 seconds to go. Happy and blown away people. It was announced that the practice was over. The spectators shouted impatiently, demanding that the 11th floor be opened. Suddenly, an angelic figure appeared in the sky, talking to the warriors climbing the tower, congratulating them for allowing the mansion to abode. Some people were surprised, thinking of this figure as an angel or even a goddess. But the spirit said it was just a system describing the assignment. The spirit also said that even if the goddess existed, what they saw was more than just something. Recorded video. The goddess spoke of a world where humans needed the help of warriors suffering from the Demon King's invasion. She offered them a mission to protect humanity. If they wanted to accept, have them ask them to say, "Pass it on." Teo asked the spirit how they knew that what they were seeing was not a goddess. Before the spirit could reply, the sword saint suddenly leaped into the sky and slashed the hologram with his sword. But the hologram of the goddess remained intact and continued to speak, repeating the message, saying, "Send." The spirit declared that he had achieved what the sword saints had achieved. He had just done it in his previous life and realized that this figure was a fake. Holy Sword's gaze connected with Teo's for a moment, and he uttered the word transfer before disappearing. In a hurry, people started saying, "Pass it on," and rushed to the 11th floor, eager to continue their journey. The goddess's message resonated with the climbers, who said that from the 11th to the 20th floor, they would have to undergo a test of faith. They had to find their own answers because those answers reveal who they are. At that moment, a knight appeared next to Teo, expressing the following frustration. Teo asked the knight what he was talking about, and the knight explained that the person who created the tower had put a lot of effort into creating it and had also left them a message, but the people had become indifferent and could not understand the miracle of the tower's existence and skills. Teo commented on Knight's unexpected sensitivity. He said he specializes in music in the outside world. It fascinates his character. Teo said that it might be hard to make money with music. The knight jokingly replied that the truth could sometimes hurt. The spirit warned Teo to be careful with the knight, because the man seemed suspicious. Suddenly, a crowd of reporters approached Teo and asked if he was the hunter. Knight smiled and took charge, apologizing to Teo for the attention he'd drawn. He said goodbye to Teo, noting that he would see him on the 11th floor. Teo asked Knight if his approach was directed toward that goal. Knight demonstrated people's ability to read and saw it as a way to show interest. Teo then asked what kind of person Knight was and what he thought of him, and Knight mysteriously had an answer in his head. Then he said, "Send," and proceeded to the 11th floor, leaving Teo with unanswered questions. Teo still couldn't believe his eyes after the knight's escape, and Spirit reminded him of his earlier warning about the knight's suspicious behavior. He was attacked by reporters, and they asked if it was true that he had cleared the 10th floor on his own, and wondered if his simultaneous guild membership was a plan orchestrated by a large guild. Teo thought he should find a way to get up to the 11th floor. Ignoring their questions, he also stated that he was trying to conquer the 20th floor. The reporters were shocked for a moment, and Teo took the opportunity to say goodbye to them and said, "Leave it to me." When he disappeared from their sight, a message appeared asking them to wish good luck to all the climbers. Upon arriving on the 11th floor, the hunter realized that he was in the midst of a large-scale war. The Sword Saint was also shocked by this chaotic scene and wondered what was going on. Amidst the chaos, someone shouted for everyone to hold on and stop the king's army for the empire. The soldiers of the empire were engaged in fierce battles with formidable demons. The commander motivated them by emphasizing the gravity of the situation. He urged them not to retreat and emphasized that the fate of the empire depended on their perseverance. In this chaos, the hunter arrived on the 11th floor and saw what was going on. Suddenly, someone warned everyone about the flying arrows and urged the hunter to quickly dodge them. The shocking sight before them threw them into awe and disbelief. But after traversing the 10th floor, Teo remained calm, knowing that the training stage was over. From now on, each stage might have similar problems. At this point, The commander approached the hunters and asked for their help. He saw them as warriors who could save the empire and prayed for their help. He explained that the port they were in was the empire's last source of vitality. In order to ensure continued support for the capital, it was crucial to secure the port. Warriors from another world were asked to lend their power to the empire. A quest notice appeared, offering hunters a new quest. The goal was to confront the disaster that had befallen the empire in the role of a cunning, evil, and powerful demon king. Finally, he gathered an army. His first goal was to cut the empire's supply line. Defending the port was the first step to saving the empire. If you don't complete this mission, you won't be able to get to the 12th floor. The hunters were attacked by various questions expressing surprise and uncertainty about the existence of the Demon King in this empire. They were thinking about how to complete the task. In response, the Sword Saint who fought the goblins acknowledged the uncertainty of the details, but suggested that the only way was to defeat these creatures. Inspired by the Holy Sword's words, the hunters rushed at the goblins, their battle cries echoing in the air. One of the hunters, torn by anger, taunted the goblins, claiming that he had killed 6,000 of their kind in 6 years. During the fierce battle, Teo received a message welcoming him and recognizing his exploits in mopping up the 10th floor. The message also listed the rewards awaiting him. Teo glanced at the map, but the spirit expressed disappointment, hoping for some special privilege. It expressed disappointment and hinted that Teo shouldn't rely on such cheap skills because he could train on his own instead. Teo continued to receive messages indicating additional bonuses. One message mentioned a hidden bonus to stage prowess, and another mentioned a blessing for it. The message informed Teo that he would have access to the abilities and locations of all non-player characters from the 11th to the 20th floor, and that there would be hidden stage bonuses. Disbelief was reflected on the spirit's face, and Teo had no choice but to smirk at the new developments. But the message didn't end there. Another notification appeared, stating that Teo had been blessed by the god of merchants. This gave him the ability to choose and possess items that existed on floors 11 to 20. As Teo's smile grew wider and he realized that this game was entirely skill-based, his eyes closed contentedly. Meanwhile, the spirit erupted in anger, venting his frustration at what he perceived as a game based on luck that relied too heavily on chance. The tower determined a theme for each floor, and the first 10 floors served as training materials. It was a city for beginners. Newcomers could adapt to the challenges of the tower, and the hunting grounds were carefully equipped. Demon Quest was from the 11th to the 20th floor. Teo considered 2 options to defeat the Demon King. The first was to have enough strength to face the army alone, and the second was to lead the army. The spirit concluded that he was going to choose option 2 and asked if he had ever commanded an army before. In response, Teo revealed his skill window and pointed out his skills. "I want to be like you." He confidently said that he had not commanded an army in the past, but believed he could acquire the necessary talent. Calling Spirit the Sword Emperor, Teo mentioned their previous conversation about the game being based on luck. He said that it would challenge the spirit and demonstrate why the game is completely skill-based. He also said that he needed to be listed as a top 100 skill specialist. The spirit shuddered and protested that this was wrong, prompting Teo to take a small step towards becoming stronger. He crossed the line, accusing Teo of cheating and questioning his lack of embarrassment. Teo dispelled the concerns about the spirit and said he felt no embarrassment. He then instructed the system to display the soldier's leadership skills, limiting the display to only the top 3. A list appeared in front of him, and Teo was asked to show these 3 locations on the map. After the locations were shown, he was also asked to mark his current location on the map. Teo smirked at Spirit, asking if he still believed. The game wasn't skill-based. He argued that an initially decent privilege had now become a truly valuable privilege. He attributed this result to the man's ability to use his mind effectively. As Teo began his journey to the place of a non-player character, the spirit expressed anger, calling the situation a joke and accusing him of just resorting to tricks. Teo laughed and replied that being able to use such tricks was also part of the skill. Teo thought about the location of the blue dot on the map and realized that the closest place to it was where he had spotted the object involved in the battle. He identified him as the commander and called out to him. The surprised commander looked at Teo and asked about his purpose. Teo admired the commander's mustache and thought he had good skills. In a serious tone, Teo asked that if the commander thought he was a warrior, he would like to ask him something. But the spirit yelled at the commander, warned him to flee, and called Teo a rogue. Unfortunately, the commander heard nothing. The commander expressed his willingness to listen and help if possible. Then Teo shocked the commander by asking him to kill him. The commander's face showed a mixture of shock and confusion. Teo revealed that he had a secret ability. If he died, the entire battlefield would receive a blessing. As long as the blessing was activated, it was a kind of suicide skill that guaranteed the Empire's victory. The stunned commander hesitated and couldn't bring himself to kill the warrior. Teo emphasized the importance of thinking about what really mattered. He explained that if the commander didn't kill him, Teo would take matters into his own hands and kill himself. He turned to the commander for help, believing that it was the best way to help the Emperor. The commander questioned the possibility of such a blessing. However, Teo continued to insist, stating that the commander, as the leader in charge of the port city, was someone who preferred to end his life at the hands of a patriot, an experienced leader, rather than die in battle with the claws of a monster. Teo turned urgently to the commander, emphasizing that time was limited. The commander expressed his reluctance to rely on the Empire to take the life of someone who came from another world to offer his assistance. The commander, realizing the cursed nature of his world, lamented the need to take the lives of warriors like Teo. With his sword ready, the commander asked God for forgiveness and vowed to send Teo down without pain. Teo thanked the commander. The commander asked him his name. Teo gave his name, and the commander thanked him on behalf of the Empire and recognized him as a true warrior. As the commander swung his sword at Teo, the reports came in. Dying Teo copied all the skills of the commander and thought, "Every man who runs has a man who flies." The goblins were attacked by a hunter boasting that he had killed 6,000 of their species in 6 years. Teo pondered another statement. For every hunter who uses his sword, there is a hunter who uses a soldier. At this point, the hunters looked ahead in shock and wondered what kind of hunter Teo was and why he was riding a horse. Teo rode his horse confidently alongside the commander, holding a white sword in his hand as they moved forward. Teo rejoiced at his new skill, battlefield perception. It was a rank B skill that allowed him to analyze the battlefield, instinctively recognize the enemy's strengths and weaknesses, and find gaps in their defenses. He copied this skill from the commander. Talking to the commander, Teo informed him that if they continued on their current path and turned right, they would run into the commander of the demon army. He said that there were a few monsters nearby, but not many, and he suggested that they destroy them all. The commander enthusiastically agreed, raised his sword and declared that the warriors of the goddess were on their side. Teo thought about how the skills he had acquired while working as a military strategist had won the general's confidence. He looked at the mini-map and at one point ordered a right turn. He admitted that he owed his success not only to his skills, but also to the preparations he had repeated relentlessly throughout the day. While they were fighting, Teo noticed the goblin tossed in the air and noticed that he looked like he was flying that day too. He realized that not everything could be explained by his skills alone. Suddenly Teo drew his sword, and it glowed. The soldiers who witnessed it recognized it as the light of the goddess and cried out in awe. It was the sacred sword of the legendary weapon's defense. Teo relished the importance of wielding the sacred sword of the ancestors, a legendary weapon associated with the founding of the empire. According to legend, the sword was given to the founder of the empire by the goddess herself, and its disappearance remained a mystery. According to the founder's prophecy, it is said that the promised one will appear with a sword on Judgment Day, and its wielder will gain the absolute trust of the empire. The soldiers who saw the sacred sword in Teo's hand cried out in awe and declared their loyalty to the empire. They welcomed the return of the founder's sacred sword, believing that heaven had not betrayed the empire. Encouraged by their support, Teo expressed his satisfaction, noting that the landscape in front of him was worth clearing the hidden scene. Spirit was furious, however, wondering why Teo had traded everything for what he thought was a shiny and useless sword. Teo justified his choice by emphasizing the sword's brilliant and durable qualities, which allowed it to dazzle non-player characters up to the 20th floor. He explained that non-player characters aren't just tools for completing missions, they also help you complete missions. The soldiers looked at Teo and asked for his protection, while some hunters watched him with envy, perplexed as to why he alone was allowed to ride with the commander. Teo basked in the attention and jealousy of those around him, relishing the fact that his actions caused such a reaction. The spirit criticized him for using his enhanced hearing to eavesdrop on gossip instead of focusing on more important things. Teo cheekily professed his love of attention. With a sweep of his sword, Teo signaled the completion of the destruction of the left wing of the demon army, and the commander announced their willingness and determination to proceed to the enemy base. Advancing forward, the soldiers spotted the Goblin King, the boss of the 11th floor, who looked puzzled and with an expression of uncertainty on his face. The Goblin King tried to escape, but Teo was on his trail. Jumping off his horse, Teo activated the high social skills of his goblins. With a powerful swing of his sword, he defeated the Goblin King and slew him with a single blow. The soldiers celebrated their victory, declaring that the warrior had defeated the demon army. The empire regained its glory, and the defeated goblins scattered in fear when they saw that their leader had fallen. The hunters expressed their contempt, thinking they had seen the retreating goblins hunting alone for their specialty, and vowed to kill them all. A report has surfaced that the 11th floor stage has been cleared. The hunters were shocked to realize that they had cleared the floor in just one day. They marveled at their strength and wondered if such a feat was possible. Another post displayed the calculations of the top 10 raiders, and Teo ranked first in terms of contribution to the raid. The hunters were surprised that the player ranked first didn't have a nickname, and the Sword Saint was ranked second. Then it became clear who Teo was, who had cleared the 10th floor. Someone began to question if he was some kind of lone master. The spirit laughed at the idea, deeming Teo a cunning and lazy slacker. Teo challenged the spirit's perception and asked if he was now considering a game skill test. The spirit turned around in anger and flatly refused. Teo noticed his anger and realized that this ghost really did value basic skills over ability. He assured him that he would train his sword skills diligently before he reached level 20. The spirit asked if he was telling the truth, and Teo was contradictorily sure that when the Sword Emperor was around him, he must be the one asking the spirit to teach him. The spirit was pleased with his answer and realized that he had finally realized his worth and began to remember the tower he had climbed in his time. Teo found the spirit's simplicity interesting and praised his candor. At that moment, the commander approached Teo and expressed his gratitude, recognizing that their victory was made possible by Teo's contribution. Teo responded modestly, stating that it was a team effort and they all played their part. The commander continued, remembering an old prophecy predicting the arrival of warriors summoned from another world to confront an invading army of demons. At first, the commander was skeptical of the warriors' determination to fight for an alien world, but admitted his doubts. But seeing Teo's unwavering determination and the successful outcome of their fight, the commander realized that his fears had been in vain. He extended his hand to Teo and expressed his gratitude once more. Teo thought and realized the importance of the handshake between him and the commander. Despite their different worlds and backgrounds, the gesture had a universal meaning. They were both human beings who shared a common humanity and the ability to extend a hand of gratitude and respect. As they shook hands, the commander expressed his hope for Teo's future accomplishments. Teo responded with determination and promised to exceed the commander's expectations and continue to strive for greatness. At that moment, a message about the calculation of the reward appeared. The best raiders will receive their deserved rewards and get the right of first passage to the 12th floor, and the rest of the raiders would have to wait until the reward was distributed to the top player. A shining light enveloped the upper raiders and heralded the teleportation to the 12th floor. Teo also began to fade away, preparing to embark on the next leg of his journey. The commander entrusted him with one last request and urged him to take care of their empire. Teo was on the verge of teleporting to the 12th floor when a spirit intervened, questioning the summoning of only the top 10. He asked if the elderly sword saint would be present and expressed concern about his potential hostility. Teo brushed off the concern, stating that the worst that could happen was death, but assured Spirit that he had a plan. Reaching the 12th floor, Teo looked around and wondered if this was the Empire's royal palace. Behind Teo, the others materialized, and the Black Witch expressed surprise at being in such a place. The investigator, also known as the cult investigator, suddenly appeared and greeted Teo, praising his incredible performance on the 11th floor. Teo was surprised and noticed that the investigator was there and used his powers to look younger. The questioning investigator noted Teo's skillful use of non-player characters and the distinctive sword he wielded, and wondered if it was a reward from the 10th floor. Teo modestly confirmed it, but the investigator asking praised his exceptional ability to lead a raid on the 11th floor using the 10th floor's bounty. Teo smiled and downplayed the flattery. However, the situation took an unexpected turn when the questioner immediately used a technique to thwart the holy sword attack aimed at Teo. Teo was puzzled by this sudden attack. The investigator expressed surprise and ridiculously doubted the holy sword's transformation into an assassin. During the conversation, the sword saint maintained a cold and determined gaze, expressing his desire to kill Teo. The questioning investigator asked for clarification, asking if the sword saint had mentioned the hunter Teo. The sword saint confirmed this, threatening to release his hand from the investigator and asking if he would step aside. The questioning investigator pointed out the inconvenience of losing his hand and emphasized the negative impact of Teo's death on the reputation of the 5 great guilds. He asked the sword saint to explain why he was targeting Teo. The sword saint refused. He said he was under no obligation to do so. Unafraid, the investigator used the divine transmission Sant technique, causing the leader and the knight to appear behind the holy sword. But the sword saint quickly flaunted his attacks, mocking their existence and calling them annoying flies. When the leader was thrown back, he cried out his frustration, wondering what the Mecha saint had consumed to possess such power. The Mecha saint responded by pointing out that the leader himself was about 40 years old. The leader committed the offense with a hint of old age, claiming that life truly begins at the age of 40. The knight intervened and urged the leader to focus on the ongoing battle, acknowledging that the odds were not in their favor. The investigator, who assessed the situation, recognized it as unfavorable. Turning to the countess, she asked for 1,000,000 gold pieces. In response, the countess offered a compound interest of 15%, and the investigator who asked the question explained that he had not asked to borrow the money. The countess expressed displeasure at the fact that she was being asked for donations by businessmen, but when asked, the investigator insisted that the money was dirty and offered to the church for salvation. The countess playfully stated that the investigator was an even bigger bandit than herself. She summoned a small bag and ordered it to pull out 1,000,000 gold coins, causing the ground to be covered in a rain of gold coins. When the investigator asked, thanks were expressed for her help. The investigator activated a holy technique called devotion, initiating transference and physical strengthening. Knight and leader were targeted, and the duration of the buff was 300 seconds. The investigator stated that for the next 300 seconds the knight and leader would be noticeably different. He then said that it would be a big problem for the holy sword, the countess, the knight, and even the leader fighting alongside him. Furthermore, the investigator said that the countess's vault had not yet been emptied, offering a choice between her bankruptcy or the death of the enemy. The countess expressed confusion and wondered why her vault was in such a situation. At that moment, the Black Witch intervened and offered advice. She revealed that it wasn't just the four of them fighting. She said that Hunter Teo had officially signed a contract with the 5 major guilds the day before. The Sword Saint expressed surprise at this revelation. The Black Witch explained that Teo, with the powers of a guild leader, participated in all 5 great guilds at the same time. She emphasized that bearing one's sword against Teo was the same as fighting all of them. The Black Witch challenged the Holy Sword and wondered if he was really ready to face them. Teo's thoughts were in a rush as he thought about the plan he had devised. He reminded Spirit of their conversation on the 11th floor and asked if he remembered what he had said. Spirit expressed confusion and asked Teo to explain that he had mentioned 2 ways to face a strong opponent. One way was to gain enough strength to crush an army alone, and the other was to gather an army of allies to fight alongside him. Teo emphasized that, as a single player, he was powerless against the hunters who had an alliance at their disposal. Determined, Teo approached the Sword Saint and asked for time to speak with him. The Sword Saint questioned his intentions, and Teo replied that he was truly puzzled by the situation. He admitted that he didn't know why the Mecha Saint had pursued him, but he wanted to express his admiration. Teo looked into the Mecha Saint's eyes and realized that his actions were not convincing enough. The Sword Saint probably still considered him an assassin sent by the Black Dragon. The spirit intervened and evaluated Teo's impressive abilities from the outside. Specifically to the Holy Sword, Teo might look like a mercenary hired by a large guild rather than a self-made hunter or perhaps colluding with them. The Sword Saint expressed his views on the tower and the outside world, saying that they weren't that much different. In the tower, he faced daily pressure from others to join the guild, but he resolutely rejected their offer. His motivation for standing on top alone was to show that ancestry, nationality, and belonging to someone who was considered humble in the outside world didn't matter in the tower. In response to Holy Sword's statement, Black Witch expressed anger, wondering how he, of all people, could say such a thing. She believed that he had survived by caring only for himself, and that if he had helped others, many more hunters would have survived. The leader yelled at the Holy Mecha, accusing him of not participating in various raids, including the 5th, 7th, and 9th floors. He expressed disappointment in him, claiming that if Holy Sword had helped, the losses could have been cut in half. The Countess expressed her disdain for the Sword Saint and said that if he had used outside influence to help, the current food shortage wouldn't be so severe. Furthermore, she argued that the current Tower Society could have been created in a much safer way. She criticized Saint Sword for his lack of sense of responsibility and compared him to children. In sheer anger, the Black Witch demanded that if a sword saint had rank number 1, he should show a sense of responsibility appropriate to that rank. At this moment, the group was gripped by a strong killing intent, and the sword saint uttered the word silence. With an angry expression on his face, he continued, expressing his frustration with their constant quarrels. He refused to talk about them and suggested that they fight with swords if they wanted to fight. The spirit, full of excitement, admired the sword saint as expected of his only disciple. Breaking the tense atmosphere, Teo raised his voice and reminded him that not even the game characters on the 11th floor participated together to save their country. The Black Witch looked at him, denying his involvement, and said that it was about something more serious than himself. Teo acknowledged her point, but emphasized that, as hunters, they should focus on mopping up the 12th floor. Instead of pointing fingers and harboring resentment, they should strive to behave better instead of getting worse. Teo turned to the Holy Sword and let him know that they were asking for his help. They claimed that their country was on the verge of collapse, called them heroes, and they couldn't put the empire in second place. Teo questioned the essence of a hero, saying that if they could solve problems that others could not, then they were heroes. In response, Holy Sword pointed his sword at Teo, calling him arrogant. However, Teo continued to not be embarrassed by this and urged him to focus on completing the remaining stages, such as the 11th floor. The knight stepped forward and supported Teo's statement, saying that it was hard to understand why the sword saint had attacked Teo, but it was clear that now was not the time for them to fight amongst themselves. The sword saint looked at the knight in confusion, and he reiterated that the current situation required them to put aside their differences and work together. Knight announced his willingness to make small sacrifices and demonstrated his unique lie detector skills to everyone in the room. This skill allowed the user to determine if someone was lying or not. This effect not only applied to humans but monsters as well. It warned that what the other party believed to be true could be objectively false. Ultimately, the choice between believing or doubting was left to each individual, and there was no guarantee that people would believe what they said. Knight claimed that her ability to discern lies was instrumental in his position as vice captain. He offered the assurance of confirmation to the Sword Saint and Teo. The validity of their statements, emphasizing that doubt was a poison that corroded people, while truth served as an antidote. The knight realized that they could not change the distrust that had arisen and invited them to cooperate, at least on the 12th floor. Teo saw it as a great opportunity, and he raised his hand, affirming his willingness to cooperate. The Sword Saint recognized the knight's sincerity and noted that he was the only one who had never harmed others. He also decided to believe him. The knight said that with the agreement of both parties, he would proceed to honestly confirm their answers, putting his honor and the honor of the vigilante at stake. He asked the Holy Sword to question Teo. The Holy Sword pointed his finger at Teo and asked him if it was true that he had killed over 4,000 people. Teo briefly replied, "Yes." Holy Sword was shocked and accused the others of using Teo as an assassin for unknown purposes. But a knight intervened and said it was a lie. Holy Sword froze in shock, not realizing what he had just heard. Knight explained that Teo's answer was a lie, meaning that he didn't kill 4,000 people. Knight turned to Holy Sword and asked if he had any more questions. The Sword Saint, still shaken, looked at Teo with a mixture of surprise and a noticeable drop of sweat appearing on his forehead. Knight commented on the strangeness of the original question, wondering if one person could even kill that many people. The Sword Saint pointed his finger at Teo again, blaming the group that raised him as an elite assassin and tripped him up. Teo replied with a smile and confirmed that he was indeed an elite assassin. However, the knight immediately stated that it was a lie and could not believe it, leaving the Sword Saint with his mouth wide open. The Sword Saint expressed his utter disbelief and believed that he would mediate without the lie. The knight reminded him that he was asking if he really trusted him. Begin, asking if he was now trying to take back his words. Shocked and stunned, the Sword Saint stated that Teo could not help but kill one man. Then Teo intervened and agreed with the Sword Saint's assertion, and the knight confirmed that it was true. Teo admitted that the killing was still murder, but insisted that the person he killed really deserved it. The knight confirmed that his statement was true, including the fact that this person was the first person who had tried to kill Teo and was actually an incredible mass murderer. The Holy Sword's face was covered in sweat, and he froze in place. The investigator who asked the question laughed and dismissed the theory, saying that it was all an interesting misunderstanding. He said that yesterday was the first time they had met only the hunter Teo. Teo approached the Holy Sword and confirmed that he had answered all the questions. He expressed relief that it was just a misunderstanding, but said that if the guildmaster hadn't protected him, he probably would have died. Teo then saw the Holy Sword and said that at this point, in his opinion, he deserved an apology. He asked the Holy Sword what he thought about it. Knight also told Holy Sword that this was the absolute truth, and Holy Sword was completely wrong. He had already asked him to apologize to Teo. Holy Sword tried to speak, and Teo wondered how he would react. He knew that the Sword Saint was famous for his pure image, while the knight was a member of the 5 great guilds. He assumed that the Sword Saint could claim that the knight had lied, or reveal his detective's eye skill card as evidence to exonerate himself. The Sword Saint asked him if his name was really Teo, and Teo confirmed it. Teo thought the Holy Sword might try to silence him by killing him, similar to what the Flame Emperor had done. He recognized that when people are wrong, they often find excuses or distrust others. He believed that the way the Holy Sword handled the situation would determine what kind of person he really was. Holy Sword looked at his sword, pondering the situation. If Teo didn't actually kill innocent people, but he suddenly cut short his words and declared that it was the wrong way, he resolutely sheathed his sword and stated that he was going to make another attempt. He bowed to Teo and apologized sincerely. He admitted that he had been wrong and had made assumptions without giving them legitimate meaning. He acknowledged that his hasty actions could have led to someone's death. Sword Saint reflected on his past belief that anyone deserving of death should be wiped from the face of the earth a second earlier. He admitted that he had acted on his own in the past, but promised that from now on such actions would never happen again. The Sword Saint recognized that words alone were useless, so he said that if Teo had wanted something different, he would have done it. He thought it was the gentlemanly thing to do, but he asked to spare him from committing suicide and forgive this shameless old man so that he could survive and reach the top of this tower. Teo was shocked by the Holy Sword's reaction. Instead of doubting the knight, making excuses for his skills, or trying to silence him, the Sword Saint admits his mistakes and humbly forgives the inexperienced hunter. Teo shows how the Sword Saint sincerely apologizes, admits his potential transgression, vows to change his lifestyle, and expresses his desire to live. Teo turned to the knight and confirmed that everything Holy Sword had said was true. Teo then asked the Holy Sword to teach him how to swing a sword. He explained that he wanted the Holy Sword to accept his request to duel whenever he asked. He said that he had managed to find a teacher, but there was no one who could practice dueling. Thus, he asked the Holy Sword to be his sparring partner. Teo stopped and said, "Sorry, try again." He expressed his willingness to forgive the Sword Saint without paying anything, but he would be embarrassed if he did. He didn't want to look like a great man because he wasn't a great man. Instead, he would be satisfied if a great man like the Sword Saint didn't see him as an enemy. Teo's face turned red when he realized that the swords had already crossed. That was why he was ashamed to forgive the Sword Saint just because he looked like a bigger person. That was why he wanted the Sword Saint to teach him the best sword techniques. Teo was embarrassed and perplexed how the Sword Saint could express his feelings so openly. The knight looked at Teo in amazement and confirmed that everything he said was true. The leader expressed his skepticism, wondering if Teo was really serious. He sensed that Teo was too embarrassed to appear arrogant or superior, so he doubted it and calmly asked for nothing. The Black Witch replied that after a long time of watching immature children obsessed with personal interests, when asked how heretical it was to watch a person like Hunter Teo, someone sincerely apologized and expressed admiration for the scene that was sincerely forgiven. People are involved in endless battles, so a genuine apology is considered a holy miracle. The Countess, despite the happy ending, expressed disappointment that her 10,000 gold seems to have been wasted. Suddenly the holy sword grabbed Teo's shoulder and shouted with a happy face, "How could he misunderstand such a kind young man?" A puzzled Teo asked for clarification. Holy Sword always waved Teo's hand and expressed his enthusiasm about becoming a dueling partner. He claimed to call Teo Grandpa. He then asked about Teo's age, suggesting that he couldn't be more than 30 years old. He told the outside world about his kind granddaughter and said that if she ever got into the tower, he would share Teo's charms with her. Feeling awkward, Teo politely declined the offer. With a serious face and tone, the Sword Saint asked if that meant Teo wasn't interested in his granddaughter. Teo apologized and explained that he wasn't interested in a romantic relationship. Holy Sword rejected Teo's answer and said that young people should never lack a source of love. Falling in love, he said, allows you to perceive things that were previously invisible, including your own depravity. He began to ask if Teo understood the significance of admitting his own viciousness. Watching this scene, the spirit realized that the Sword Saint was a stubborn old man and called him Boomer Obsessed. He explained that this was what a boomer was. In addition to refusing to listen to others, he stated that the Sword Saint's unwavering determination could lead him to divinity. The Holy Sword assured Teo not to worry and promised to take care of him. He noticed Teo's shabby clothes and suggested he start with a suit. Feeling depressed, Teo considered killing himself and starting the day over. However, at that moment, he received a message that he had won first place in passing floor 11 and would receive the appropriate awards. Teo realized that since he had taken first place, he was being rewarded first. He remembered hearing about the clear conditions on floors 12 through 20 before his return. He wondered what the awards would be. He was offered 2 reward options, from good and from evil. The reward of good was protection, explaining that the goddess was deeply moved by Teo's efforts and offered an important position in the empire. He could be prime minister, a great general, or even a great knight. His choice of position would provide him with the appropriate abilities and status suitable for the role. This motivated Teo to gather his strength with the other heroes and destroy the Demon King core of the 20th floor. However, Teo realized that if he chose the goddess's reward, he would not be able to choose the Demon King's reward. Teo realized that this was part of the theme from floors 11 to 20, including role-playing. A hunter takes a position in the empire and receives the corresponding abilities and status. The best participants from the previous stage were given the exclusive right to choose these special positions before anyone else. At that moment, another message appeared, indicating the special classes available on the 12th floor. He read the new positions and remembered that he could only choose from positions like guards before, but he was interested in the demon's reward. Curiosity took over, and he turned and read the description of the Demon King's reward. It explained that the Demon King was deeply moved by Teo's efforts and secretly asked for his cooperation. The Demon King promised the same reward as the goddess, but added another gift. Teo had to kill all of the top 10 heroes except himself. If he accomplished this feat, the Demon King would immediately raise Teo to the 99th floor. But there was a catch. Only 10 of the top 1 players could receive the Demon King's reward. If more than one person chose this award, one person would be chosen at random, and if no one chose the award, she would die. Teo was shocked after reading about the award and asked about it. The leader looked at him and asked why he was suddenly staring into the air. Teo looked around nervously, sweat beading on his face. He pondered the possibility of getting to the 99th floor in one go, killing everyone present. But before he could fully comprehend the situation, a message appeared, addressing him as Hunter, and once again asking him to choose a reward.